Billy Baker, you are a staff writer for the Boston Globe, and you are the author of this new book, We Need to Hang Out, a memoir about making friends. Billy, thank you so much for being here. Yes, that's a better image. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
being here.
having me.
So, Billy, I can see that you have a great sense of humor. Every other page, I'm just laughing because it's the kind of things that you mention, the kind of things that we guys would do in this and the other occasion, and through emotions that we don't dare to say out loud. So that's just great reading. I wonder if we could start with a little bit of your background from the moment that you decided you wanted to become a writer until you ended up at the Boston Globe.
Sure, yeah, no, I am someone who, when I was in college, I started reading like the Beat Generation writers like Jack Kerouac and William Burroughs. And then I went through a phase of being in love with Hunter S. Thompson and Tom Wolfe. And when I was getting out of college, I had in my head that I was going to write the great American novel. And while I was doing that, my parents said, hey, maybe you should get a job. So I got a job at the local newspaper and, a tiny little weekly newspaper. And I loved it immediately. So I became a journalist. And I still haven't written the great American novel, but I'm 44 years old. So I've been a journalist for a long time now, like 20 something years. And I've been at the Boston Globe for a long time, about 15 of those years. And what led me to write this book was an assignment for the Boston Globe magazine, an assignment that I didn't want to take on, but I did, and I'm glad I did.
What is it about journalism that you like? You say that you immediately enjoy it.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like everybody thinks their life is an epic, and they're like so thankful that somebody showed up to finally listen to it. So as you're bouncing from story to story, it's so wonderful to get to meet meet people. And I'm the sort of person, the sort of stories I write, I'm usually writing about people that have probably never been written about before. At the same time, I've always said that being a journalist is like having a backstage pass to the world, right? So like, you flash this press credential and I can kind of go anywhere. So I'm a curious person. I'm curious about a lot of things. I'm a classic generalist in that I know a little bit about a lot of things. And so being a journalist kind of fit that side of my personality that is enthusiastic and a bit scatterbrained, so I can just I parachute into someone's life and I learn whatever it is about them that interested me in the first place, and then I chop her back out and I'm on to the next thing. And like, I mean, you can kind of see a little bit in the background here. These are random Post-it notes. Some of them are the outline for a new book I'm working on, but all over the walls are just this says like bird watching, like just as an idea, like I'd like to find somebody who's into bird watching.
Right.
And then the beauty of being a journalist is I can kind of not just go out with somebody who's into bird watching, but go out with someone who's like the most famous bird watcher, around, so I go right to the top. So in general, I'm the sort of person that uses journalism as a scam. It's a caper. I'm just trying to live an interesting life. And by means of working for a publication that is respected in this area, I can usually knock on a door and be admitted inside.
Wow, that sounds so great. Listen, whenever there's some famous speaker coming to Montreal, I write to the organizers and I tell them, I'm a podcaster. I'm going to write or something about your event. Let me in, and I get free tickets.
Yeah, it matters, I mean, and it's something you have to earn that in a way, like, I mean, if you just, wanted free tickets, they'd catch on to you. But, I mean, I think you get admitted because, I'm sure they look you up before, they're not just giving you free tickets, and they're like, here's a careful, someone who cares about the story. They can be trusted with this.
Right,
So
right.
I think I can be trusted at this point. Some people would disagree, but
Well,
in general, like I also write with humor and warmth. So I think a lot of people are like happy to be portrayed in a way where they seem like a fun person because, you know, I'm a big fan of having fun, and I usually write about fun people.
Well, the Boston Globe is a nice entry ticket, or it has some kind of name. So you said that this assignment was given to you, and you were not so enthusiastic about it. Can you tell us how that happened?
Sure. So I was summoned to an editor's office at the Boston Globe magazine with the promise that they had a story that I'd be perfect for. And this is one of the oldest lies in journalism. This is how they con you into doing something you won't want to do. But it works on the right sort of ego. So I walk into this office like, oh, hey, you know, I'm so honored. What is it you think is perfect for me? So I sit down, and the editor looks at me and says, I want you to write about how middle-aged men have no friends. And so as I'm having this like existential crisis in his office, like, well, why, you know, like I'm all over the place. The editor, is rattling off all this data about how there's this loneliness epidemic going on right now and about how it has catastrophic consequences, not just for your mental health, but your physical health. And so I'm, you know, as I'm sitting in this editor's office, everything's swirling, and immediately, I mean, the word loneliness, the idea of being a member of like an epidemic, these are all things I wanted nothing to do with, right? So I tell the editor I'll think about it, which is another con. So I then walk back to my desk in the newsroom, and as I'm walking back, I'm trying to talk my way out of this article. You know, I'm like, no, I've got my buddy Mark, and you know, yeah, like how often do I see him? You know, like maybe a couple times a year, you know, and then my friend Rory, and God, I haven't seen him in like, and all of a sudden it's like, you know, I'm running through this list in my head of people I think of as like my best friends in the world. And it's like, oh my gosh, like how did this happen? So by the time I got to my desk, it was like, oh, you know, they're right. I am the perfect guy for this article, but not because I was unusual in any way. It was because I felt like my story was fairly typical. You know, I was the middle-aged guy who like, you know, had done a lot of things right in theory. You know, I had a job I liked and a wife and kids, and you know, I went to the gym and exercised, all these things, but it was like there was no time slotted out in my day-to-day life for friendships. You know, and I think I thought of that as something you did when the important stuff was over, but like the important stuff is never done, right? Like, and I was, I think, guilty of putting too much weight in the like, oh, we should organize a big weekend away, you know, and go, you know, rent a cabin or go camping or something like that. And it was like, that's always great, but you know, you might pull that off once a year, and it's like, what about on my day to day? Like, I just, you know, and I was also someone who I think a lot of people in the modern world are in this situation. I was someone who no longer lived where they grew up. So I had moved about an hour away from where I was born, not super far, but far enough to be in a new community and a new ecosystem. And I knew people here, you know, I knew the other dads at the, you know, standing on sidelines of a sporting event or something, but I didn't really have any friends. So I ended up writing this article for the Boston Globe magazine. It was called The Biggest Threat Facing Middle-Aged Men is Not Smoking or Obesity, It's Loneliness. That is a very wordy, kind of boring title, right? I wouldn't have thought that it was the sort of thing that was clickbait. But what happened was unprecedented. It ended up becoming the most popular article that the Boston Globe had ever run. And it
Wow.
was viral everywhere, viral in Canada, viral in Australia. I'm getting emails from all over the world. And in the article, I had kind of made it a safe space for this thing that men aren't, you know, really comfortable talking about by admitting to my problems. I never said, here's your problem. I said, here are my problems. Here's how I got, you know, I thought through to get to this point. And I heard from thousands of men around the world, thousands. It would not stop coming. My email was chaos. And what was interesting was they weren't asking for more evidence that this was a thing. They weren't asking me to prove that there really was a cancer. They were asking me what's the cure for the cancer. And so on the surface, that's an easy question to answer. The cure for loneliness is friendship. But actually implementing that into your daily life, actually building a friendship network into your day-to-day when you're an adult with a zillion things to do. I mean, my calendar is right here. It's chaos. It's full. Like I don't have time for friends, but I needed to figure out how to make time. So the book is really about, it starts in the same way as the article did, with me kind of reluctantly admitting I had structured myself into being a loser, and then trying to figure out how to change that. And it's really a story, it's an adventure, and it kind of happens in two phases. When I first started out, my natural reaction was to say, well, I gotta get the band back together. I've got to work on my friendships from the past. I'm not someone that doesn't have friends. I have great friends. I'm just have no way to be friends with those friends. So I set off, I reconnected, I got, the boys back together. We did fun things and all that. I talked to a lot of experts. And then I got to a point where I realized that that still didn't solve the fact that I didn't have anyone to hang out with on a Wednesday night. Like I could do these big elaborate things, I could organize a weekend away, but in my, when I look out the window here at my new community, like I didn't have a squad. I didn't have an active membership in a tribe. And that's so important for humanity, for men and women and all of us. You need to feel like you have a social connection to a group or to people, whatever it might be. And I was missing that in my new life. So the second half of the book is really about me trying to make new best friends, which sounds like something you can't do as an adult, right? Like that we know from the scientific literature that when people are asked to name their best friend, they name someone from their childhood or maybe high school or college, and there's kind of a cutoff. You need to go way back with someone before you would dare call them a best friend. But there was this quote from the actress Mindy Kaling that she said on her TV show, which was that a best friend is not a person, it's a tier. And that was kind of liberating to hear, because then I was free to not think of, I could add new best friends, but that wasn't an insult to my old best friends. I was just adding more than one person can hold that title. So the second half of the book was me basically trying to start a men's group, like a fraternity, to hang out on a Wednesday night. And, it was painful. It's a little awkward. These are things that men aren't supposed to admit or say out loud. It's very uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, I added new best friends, and I'm no longer short of anyone to hang out with on a Wednesday night.
Wow, this seems to be a very sensitive topic. The same reaction that you got, hundreds of email. I'll tell you something. I wrote a small 500-word post of how I felt lonely, inspired on your book, and I got 5 dinner invitations to, don't feel lonely, come and hang out with us. So this is something that people feel themselves, but they also want to help out. And it seems like the critical point is making the first move. Like, you would like to go over someplace, or you would like having someone over, but just making the first email or text or phone call or Zoom call, it seems to be a big barrier. Now, let me ask you, your book, you talk about the difference in friendship between women and difference in friendship between men. Can you tell us what are the differences?
Yeah, so when I first heard this, it kind of blew my mind. But sociologists do these things called photo studies. And they just go around and they creep around on people and take pictures of them interacting, and then they analyze them for patterns. And the easiest pattern to see is the differences in between how men and women interact. So women talk face to face, and men talk shoulder to shoulder, okay? So the first time I heard that, I was just staring off into the distance, and it was like, I could see it everywhere. All of a sudden, it was like, oh, okay. Like, it's the proverbial, like, 2 guys sitting at a bar next to each other, or you're sitting at a sporting game, and also it made me realize why I would never, the classic thing is, oh, we haven't seen each other in too long, like, let's get together for coffee. But it was like, I don't want to get together for coffee. There's some reason that never sat right. I don't want to sit face to face. I feel like I want to do something. So the reason men bond shoulder to shoulder is because we bond through an activity. You know, if someone invited me over for, you know, meet them at a coffee shop, you know, I might show up. But if they said, do you want to come over and help me cut down this tree in my backyard? I'd be there at 6 a.m., right? Like that would be the exact sort of thing I'd want to do with my friend. And so, I mean, once I got my head around that, it kind of became a way to, it was like a hack in a way. Like, you know, when I was thinking of ways to be friends with my friends, it wasn't we should hang, you know, I mean, the book is called We Need to Hang Out, but there needs to be other things behind this. It's showing intent, being intentional is the first step. But after that, to actually make it work, other than it being a sort of nice gesture, oh, we should get together sometime, you need to really think about activity. And so in the book, I use this phrase. I hunted around forever to kind of figure out what is it that we need. And I came up with this phrase, velvet hook, which is actually a translation from the French, which maybe you probably can help me out with this. It's it's velour crochet, which I think, you know, translates to English as velvet hook. And now velour crochet are the two words that were combined together to make the word Velcro.
Okay.
Okay, so what we need for friendship is a velvet hook, something sort of soft that connects us, but isn't another one of these ironclad commitments on the calendar, like all these things that I can't skip today. I have to do this. I don't want friendship to feel like a pain, another chore, right? So, and what are these velvet hooks? We know what they are, right? They're the men's sports league. They're the book club. They're that, you know, the whatever that thing is that's on your agenda, the bowling night, you know, like it's these little things that like kind of are built into the calendar. When something's on the calendar, life will find a way to work around it, right? If it's every Tuesday night on this time you do this, like life will work around it. But you know what happens if you try and schedule something, especially with a group of guys, it's, you know, they're throwing out dates and this doesn't work. And pretty soon you're like, it's never going to happen, you know? So I think it's a matter of finding these velvet hooks, especially for men who bond through activity primarily. Women are much better at being able to keep deep friendships going over the phone. There's all sorts of interesting studies that show this, like, in it kind of felt like a relief when I learned there was science around this, because I hate the phone. I don't know what it is. After about a minute, I'm like, all right, I'll talk to you later or never. Like, this doesn't feel like right. In real life. And the other big question in this book, it's the question of our time, is like, what effect does social media have on all of these things? And right now there's this kind of a chicken and an egg problem, where we know people who spend a lot of time on social media are measurably lonelier than their peers, but it doesn't make clear whether they're lonely from spending a lot of time on social media or they're going to social media because they're lonely.
Right.
The only way for me to figure it out was to quit social media cold turkey, which I did. And it's been like 3 or 4 years now. And I feel like my relationships are stronger because they have to happen in real life. And when we do get together in real life, we are no longer robbed of that need to catch up. And that sounds like weirdly simple, but you know, I went for a hike the other day with a friend. I haven't seen her in a couple of years. And we spent like 2 hours talking about our lives, what's been going on, all that. If we had stayed Facebook friends, I would know what our kids look like and what their names were and what, you know, the basic, you know, the sort of surface level details of her life, and we might not have gone there. And also, a lot of people seem to be asking me lately, what do we do about politics? Because politics seems to come between so many people. The easiest thing for me was to quit social media. Then I don't know what their politics are. It doesn't come up in regular life all that much, right? Like, so, yeah.
So you went hiking with a female friend. Funny enough, you don't mention any friendship with female friends in this book. So is it always the barrier of maybe something more than friendship being a possibility that prevents us from having female friends, or what's your take on that?
I mean, so I wrote about male friendship because there's almost nothing about it out there. Like, there's, you know, so there are many books about female friendship. Women are so much more open to talking about this topic and working on it. Like I was filling a niche that didn't exist, right? Like, I mean, if there was an Amazon category on like male friendship, it would just be me, right? Like, it's poorly underserved. So I focus there. And a lot of people are asking me, why didn't I focus on women?
That's not what I
My,
mean. It's friendship
yeah.
between men and women.
So, and the other one is why didn't I focus on men and, intergender
Yes.
relationships? And that's because when I sat down and thought about my relationships that were still working and working well, it was the ones with women. And I think it's because they were stronger at friendship than I was. So I mention it very briefly in the book that, that was, I in this same room, I wrote down the names of all the people I cared about in this world to do this experiment involving this thing called Dunbar's number. Complicated topic, but so many of them were women, and when I thought about the women, I still felt closer to them than with a lot of my best guy friends, because the women were much more likely to have like reached out or sent me a text or called me one time, or like, when we did, before I went on this journey to fix my friendships, if I had any social life, it was because my wife scheduled time to hang out with like other couples, there's this joke I saw a comedian do, John Mulaney. He's a comedian and he hosted Saturday Night Live not too long ago. And he started, most of it was about how men have no friends, which I was like, he's stealing my joke. But he said, dads don't have friends. Moms have friends, and those friends have husbands. And it felt kind of that way. Like my guy friends were the other dads, that we would get together with. So I neglected it intentionally, and I also used a joke essentially, but I think it's the truth, which is the only thing I know with absolute certainty about women is that they don't want a man speaking for how they think or feel. So for me to get into how their dynamics work is a recipe for me getting canceled. So I'm just going to stick with the guys who need it. I get that. I only, I wrote this, I hate to say I wrote a book that I think men need, but like I wished this book existed. It didn't, so I wrote it, and I wrote it in a way that's, it's short, it's fun, it kind of hides the learning. It's written for the sort of guy who probably doesn't read a lot of books, who, would never think they need something like this, but who might have a wife who say, hey, I heard this guy on the radio the other day, you might like it. It's pretty funny. And I titled it in such a way where it's the sort of thing where it's like, you might pass it to one of your friends and, in that, hey, you're a loser, so you might like this. But it's an easy way of kind of, extending your hand and saying, hey, I missed you.
So I have one last question. So you mentioned yourself that you live in a place that is about an hour from where you used to live. And there's a lot of mobility in the United States, in Canada. I myself, I come from another country. I'm from South America. So in this scenario where we don't have access to our old friends and we can come to a new neighborhood, let's say, how do we develop new friendships and how do we maintain them?
Yeah, so I think you need to find these velvet hooks. I mean, if you don't have friends, if you don't have a tribe, you need to find one or you need to make one, And I mean, I think finding a tribe is sometimes as easy as like, what are your hobbies? What are your interests? And then you find people doing that. You already have something shared. You just have to take the first step. It's humiliating, right? I did so many things in this book that were humiliating. I was the guy trying to reunite everyone and bring people. And I mean, so many nights I would just sit there just like, please don't let this be the most embarrassing night of my life, but like, you've got to be willing to be vulnerable, which is something that men are not raised to be, right? You're not raised to be comfortable, but it was comical. And all I can say is anytime I made myself vulnerable to the world, I was rewarded. And I never would have thought that was the case. I think I'm still, locked in middle school where I think when I make myself vulnerable, I'm going to be trampled by the mean kids, right? Like, but that, as an adult, that wasn't the case. But you gotta find those velvet hooks. And you also have to think of friendship, I think, in a different way. I think it's easy to get locked in that I already have my best friends. They're from back there. I don't see them that much anymore, but I'm lucky to have them. very true. But you need someone to hang out with on a Wednesday night. If you don't have someone to answer that question with, you need to create that person. And they're probably right in front of you, right? I think it's so easy to think of like a coworker as just that, just a coworker, even though you might spend all day talking to them, that you might know more about them than you know about your wife at the moment. But like, you got to make these steps and take it to that next level. I mean, there are certainly people who are very, they're introverts, they're kind of real loners, they might be like real clinically lonely. In that case, certainly there are experts to talk to, there are psychologists and all that. But if you're the typical person, and sadly, the data indicates that the average person is very lonely, whether you want to admit it or not, the average person is scoring at a level we call high loneliness. And it is only getting worse with our successive generations. Every generation in America is measurably lonelier than the one that came before. So in each of these instances, you only need one good friend, but it's better to have a little squad, a little tribe, a little group to get together with. I mean, here's a fun fact that 3 people is the best size group for laughter, and 4 people is the best size for conversation. Like, just knowing these little things, you may go, you know what, I want to have a few laughs tonight. I'm going to get 2 guys together, like takes a little pressure off, than the one-on-one, but yeah, you just have to be intentional about it.
Billy Baker, this is amazing stuff. I wonder if you could flash the book one more time, tell us the title, and where you're not in social media, so how can people follow you?
They can read the book and, I don't know, send me an email. I'm not on social media, but it's amazing how many people send me emails. I'm hearing the book's been out for about 3 weeks, and it's just incredible how many men have read it and said, I haven't read a book in 10 years, but that book was hilarious and it kind of changed my life. So
it was funny. It was very fun. For the audience, it's very fun. You will have a laughter. Billy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.